what are other things that you guys have thought about, have seen in the past 5 years that you think you'll be doing differently? And I guess I'm coming from this in an angle of like, what are some things that newbies might be worrying about a lot that actually doesn't matter, and you guys 5 years down the road feel like, hey, or maybe there are things that you would have done differently if, you know.
I don't know that we would have done anything differently. I think the way it evolved turned out to be really great for us. I mean, what we learned about ourselves, what I learned about myself, and I think it's true for Brent, is that we're so much more flexible than we ever imagined. I mean, when you are living in the United States and you have, your job and your set hours and your routine that you do, you can get into a rut. But when you become a digital nomad, you're kind of forced to get out of that rut and be more flexible in terms of your living situation or arriving in a new country and figuring out, exactly where I'm going to live, how I'm going to shop, what is the local culture like. And so we learned that about ourselves. I personally also learned I'm much more of an extrovert than I thought back in Seattle. I didn't have a huge circle of friends. It's harder to make friends in the United States because everybody's so busy and people have families and kids, and their careers take up a lot of their time. And then you live in a big city with a lot of traffic, and organizing get-togethers becomes something. Well, look at my calendar, and we'll pen it in, and okay, I know it's going to take an hour to drive across town. Oh, that's going to be a drag, but we'll do it. It just felt like it was hard. We had good friends in the States, but it felt like it was getting harder and harder to see them. So I just didn't feel like I had that big of a circle of friends. Then we became nomads, and I started meeting people who were living a lifestyle that matched my lifestyle. It was easy to do things with them. It was easy to hang out. And I started realizing how much I enjoyed doing that and acquiring those friends. And that first year, we were worried about being lonely. We're older than a little bit older than your average digital nomad, and we weren't sure what it was going to be like, how we were going to fit in. But we found this community of digital nomads. It's a wonderful group and accepting. And all of a sudden, we had these friends all around the world. And frankly, it's almost become too much these days. Everywhere we go, we're constantly meeting up with people. What did you learn?
Well, I think to your question, Rex, that what has surprised us, I think, or what questions would people just starting out have? And I think that was a big one we had. Like Michael said, were we going to be lonely? And as Michael suggests, the opposite is true. But I feel like we've also learned that you sort of get what you give. It goes back to this question of life balance. I mean, a lot of people express frustration with loneliness, but for me personally, I have found that you have to make yourself available. I do think it is much easier to make friends as a nomad. On the other hand, it's harder to maintain them because your friends are constantly in flux. You're constantly on the move, and you may have. It's a little bit like that first year of college. If you go to university, that first couple of weeks, everybody's so receptive because everybody's been torn away from their social networks. Everybody wants, they're receptive to new friends. Well, that's sort of the status quo for nomading. That people are new in town. They're willing to make those relationships, and people, you spend every day or every other day with somebody for a month or 2 months. And I've had this experience where, literally I've spent 2 months really getting to know a person, really loving them and connecting with them. And then, I look at them on Facebook and it's like, oh, that's your last name. Like I didn't even know their last name, and yet I feel like I have this great deep connection. But the more we do this, the more I have discovered that you really sort of have to cultivate that. You have to put yourself out there. You have to risk rejection. It's just like dating, I guess. And you can't don't win friends by thinking, well, I'm just going to be really, really witty and I'm going to be really smart and charming. It's like you win friends by being a good friend, by checking in on people and by being available. And Michael, when we were in Thailand, we had met some guy. We'd only seen him 2 or 3 times. He was a friend of a friend, but suddenly he was gone. He wasn't coming into co-working. And Michael checked on him, and it turned out he had gotten dengue fever and he was in the hospital, and he didn't have anybody to check on him. And I still think to this day, that impression, because Michael made the effort to reach out and say, are you okay? And then we check in on him and we keep checking in on him. And suddenly, when you're in a situation like that, when you're vulnerable and you are literally alone, he was traveling by himself, having somebody just make that small gesture, which took Michael, 10 seconds, but he thought to do it, which I guess is the point. And by doing that connection, it's not just a question of being witty at a cocktail party. It's like really caring about a person. And that's how you get people. I mean, it's not Machiavellian. I don't mean it like it's a transaction, but because the more you give, the more you get. But that is just a reality that we have discovered. And it feels to me, when we were in the United States, relationships felt more transactional because, I'm a writer, people are networking and they think, how can this person help me in my career? And I don't want to over romanticize the nomad or the expat community, but those things seem to matter much less when you're away from, New York or Los Angeles or Seattle, the big corporate centers. And what matters is, do I like this person? Do I connect with? Does this person care about me? Do I care about them? Is there a connection? And that's, it's weird to be in my 50s and really discovering something that I feel like I should have known all along, but I didn't really, not until we started doing this.
But you guys are from Seattle, right? Which has that famous Seattle freeze thingy.
Yes, that's funny. You've heard of it, and it's true. That's true. Yeah, it's absolutely true. People are very reserved.
Yeah. I guess what's interesting here when I hear you say this whole story is that because this idea of loneliness and finding friends, it's, as I observe, quite a big problem, right? Like, and it's not just about nomads traveling long term. Apparently, like anyone that's starting to travel or their first time doing solo travel, that's apparently a big consideration. They will always be thinking that, what if I feel lonely? What if I can't, make friends on the road? What are some ways that you guys start making friends at a new place? Is it more towards the nomading side of things, whereby you are going co-working or joining like these retreats or specific nomad events, or is it more of the travel side of things, whereby maybe you're going on a tour and then with the tour you find someone? What are some of the good methods that you guys have found that's easy to meet someone new?
Well, I think you touched on two of the best ways of doing it. Co-living and co-working would be the first part. Our first year, we did quite a bit of co-living, and we made great friends that we are still friends with to this day. As a matter of fact, we're meeting up with 3 of them in Italy in 2 weeks. We're going to be seeing them again.
2 more in Amsterdam.
2 more in Amsterdam. Yeah, that we made that first year. So I think co-living and co-work is an outstanding way to do that. Co-working and co-living will often have events where it's very easy to meet and socialize, and I think that's a really important part of it. But I also think I don't travel just to meet other Americans or Westerners or even digital nomads. I mean, one of the best parts of our travel has been meeting local people, and that's a different kettle of fish. That can happen by going to local coffee shops that maybe aren't necessarily digital nomad hotspots. I got to know a young lady in Novi Sad. I only discovered that coffee shop right towards the very end, but she and I really hit it off, and we spent a fair bit of time chatting. Here in Ohrid the other day, I was out for, I tend to go out for morning walks and take pictures, and I was sitting on a bench, and the bench over next to me had an older man with a dog, and I looked over and I said, oh my gosh, your dog's beautiful. It was a Malamute, which seems a little unusual here. Anyway, that led to a conversation where he was really curious about my being a digital nomad. He's a stained glass artist. He invited me to come to his studio, so I went over to his studio yesterday to see the work he's doing, and now he and his wife are going to have Brent and I up. This is the village Brent mentioned. They've got a small house in a rural village, so we're going to go up there and see that. And so we've made that local connection and that friend. It's a way of not being lonely. And I also think for the LGBTQ community, there's a great community of non-digital nomads waiting for you to plug into there. You go there, we often check out the gay rights group, because of our being writers, we want to talk to them about what's like to live there and write a story, and we make friends that way. So I think that's a golden opportunity that not other communities necessarily have, that gay community to plug into.
You really have to. I mean, travel changes you in good ways. I think it forces you to sort of reinvent yourself and deal with your insecurities. And I think, I mean, we're lucky because we're a couple. We're never really alone because we're always together. There are other problems with traveling as a couple, but ultimately I think that's a good thing. And a lot of our single friends have talked about how it's hard to date because you meet somebody, and if you're dating a local person, your visa expires after 2 months and you move on. Or if you're dating a nomad, suddenly, well, do you go to the next country or city together? Does that sort of implies a seriousness that you may not be ready for? There are complications, but ultimately at the end of the day, you have to put yourself out there. And if you reach out to somebody and they react poorly, if they make you feel awkward or if they reject you, that's really their problem, not yours. If somebody is not receptive to your gesture, that really has nothing. It says nothing about you. You have to maintain you have to get rid of your cynicism, the idea that everybody's a jerk and most people are selfish. You have to get over that, because honestly, I don't think that's the case. My experience is, well, there are people that I don't connect with. Most of the local people we meet, and most of the nomads, most of the expats are pretty generous people. They're pretty open, generous people, and you learn pretty quickly if you connect or not. And I look back over, as I said before, I look back over the first 50 years of my life, and I think I would have been a lot happier if I had been less suspicious about other people, if I'd been just willing to go with it and think that if it doesn't work, it's just didn't work. It doesn't say I'm a bad person or that I'm unlovable or whatever those terrible things we tell ourselves. Just be open to it. That's what I think that's the biggest lesson of travel, that for it to work, you have to be open to whatever. You have to let things unfold. And because if you make plans, it's never going to go according to plan, but that's the beauty of life, that you will discover some unexpected new experience or some unexpected person. And I mean, I can't tell you how many times we've been on a tour or whatever, and all you have to do is just make the slightest gesture towards a person, just smile at them and say, oh, where are you from? And then you're off and talking. And it's very rare that, people just reject you and sit in silence. The thing that you fear, the awkward thing, rarely happens. And on the contrary, you have a pleasant afternoon, and sometimes you make a connection and you see them for dinner, and then you end up traveling with them, or who knows what. And it's a wonderful, magical thing.